Welcome to Smash Avro Property. Today I'm speaking with Matt Sharp. He's a 32-year-old with a $2 million property portfolio. Matt has an incredible story, including almost doubling the value of his principal place of residence, acquiring 2 more properties along the journey, and now talks to us about a shift in his investing pace. Matt has recently been married and now has a kid on the way, and I guess this is the main reason for getting Matt onto the podcast. We should all be thinking about our next stage of life, and Matt talks to us about his preparing for this next phase.
I guess it's just going to be a wait and see. I'm very happy and comfortable with where our portfolio is at the moment. All the systems and things we have in place at the moment is going to allow my wife to sort of have a substantial time off, while the baby's young, which is important to both myself and her. But if we don't purchase anything in the next few months, it might just be a wait and see where things are at in 12 months, 18 months, and go forward from there.
As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, and property investing advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. So without any further ado, let's get house hunting with Matt. Matt Sharp, welcome to Smash Avro Property.
Hi Jordan, thanks so much for having me.
No, that's all right, mate. Thanks for reaching out to get your story on here. I'm very excited. I saw your inquiry come through and you had a pretty good story to share with us. But I think you, as you alluded to in your inquiry, you're a little bit older than the 30-plus age group, only a touch older, so that's fine. But I think the main reason of getting you on today is, you're sort of in that next phase of life. I mean, you've been a property investor yourself. You're now running a buyer's agency, but you're in that sort of second stage of your life, or third or fourth, or whatever stage you'd like to call it. But you're married, you've potentially got kids on the way, hopefully only one, but we'll let you get into that. But also implemented some money management and doing some cool stuff with IPA and the QPIA course as well. So there's plenty to dive into, but to get us started, why don't you talk to us about what inspired you to get into property investing in the first place, and how old you were when you started?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for the intro. Yes. So I guess what inspired me initially was it's hard to pinpoint exactly when I got the property investing bug, but I think it was probably in my late teens or early 20s. I used to play rugby league at a reasonably high level when I was younger, and that meant a lot of Saturday nights sort of staying in while all my friends were out partying, and I stumbled across a show on Foxtel, Margaret Lomas, who's probably one of the biggest names in the property investment space in Australia. And, I used to watch her show religiously on a Saturday night while everyone was out, while I was home preparing for footy the next day. And the bug probably started there, I guess. I learned a lot of the fundamentals from her, and from there, I guess, my interest grew through books and whatever else, and podcasts in the later years. But I guess initially it was just about, security, financial freedom, all the things that most people are sort of looking for in a strong, robust property portfolio, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And it's quite crazy when you catch the bug too. I mean, obviously people listening to these podcasts would probably have the bug to go searching for a property podcast. Is pretty rare if you're not into property, but when you catch that bug, it's just, you just want to consume as much as possible. So I definitely feel you on that one. But talk to us a little bit about, when you were younger, in that late teens, early 20s sort of thing. I mean, was money talked about quite heavily in the household? I mean, what was this sort of background about money and investing and growing your financial future?
Mate, it wasn't spoken about. So I was actually quite fortunate. So my stepdad, he's an accountant, and obviously he's very, he loves his figures and loves his money. But in saying that, there was never a time that we were forced into doing anything. One thing that I'm very thankful for is myself and my 3 brothers decided at a very young age that we were all going to contribute $100 a week into a joint account. And one day the goal of that account was to one day buy property together when we first started that. So I think I started that at around 19. So we kicked that off, and we were all committed to that. And I think that was basically, that was a really, that taught me really good lessons about money management and putting some money aside. But we stuck with that for, I think in the long run, it was around 4 or 5 years. And turns out we didn't all buy property together, but we all took a substantial amount of money out of that account after that 5 years, I guess.
That's really cool. It's probably the first time I've heard that come through. I mean, there's been other people who have bought properties within the family trust together or family house together. But I think that's a really cool thing to have your brothers around you and, dedicate and hold each other accountable to putting away savings every week or month or however long you did it. But that's amazing. Like that's a really cool way to do it. And there can be some hardships with buying properties together. So I think you might have got away lucky there with pulling the cash out and using it for your own property. But yeah, that's a pretty cool story. And I think, was that probably part of the hardest part of getting started back then? I mean, just saving and all that sort of stuff. I mean, what do you think was the hardest part of getting started, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, mate, you mentioned a couple of things there about accountability, and I think that is probably the main thing that we gained from having that joint account. And even I've had cousins and friends and certain people sort of speak to me about, how did you save that, or what'd you do? And I think there is a huge amount of positives in having a joint account with something and saying, look, this is going to be, let's lock this in for the next 12 months, 2 years. You hold each other accountable. And mate, it wasn't all rosy in those years when we were saving, because as you know, savings goes up very slowly. You're just slowly chipping away. There were times there where I wanted to pull out, one of my other brothers wanted to pull out, but we all sort of band together, and it was like, no, we're one in, all in here. But you're definitely right. We did the right thing by not purchasing together. I was the one that was hell bent on property. I wanted to buy straight away. A couple of other brothers were in different stages of their lives. One of my brothers was living overseas. But I feel as though saving that initial deposit is probably the hardest and the biggest thing that I had to overcome, and probably most property investors or purchasers need to overcome in order to make sure that they can obviously step foot on the property market, on the property ladder.
Yeah, for sure. That's really cool. And just to give us a bit of context about, how big your deposit was and all that sort of stuff, why don't you let us know what your first property was, how old you were when you bought it, and how much of a deposit you had?
Yeah, so I had my deposit was 73,000. So that was made up of 10% deposit for the house, and obviously your stamps and everything else that are associated with your purchase. My parents weren't in a position to go guarantor or anything like that, and also at the time of the purchase, we there were no first homeowner grants or anything like that. I think I was in that sort of 2 or 3 year period where first homeowners were required to purchase with stamps and everything else associated with it. But that was in 2013, and I was 24 years old then. And mate, I still live in this place today. It's my owner-occupier place at the moment, and we paid $520,000 for it back in 2013, and it's currently valued now. Obviously, we've been on a good run, but and we've done some minor renovations, but it's currently valued at somewhere between $9 and $950.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's almost doubled the growth. That's incredible, mate. You've done really well out of that one, and to save that sort of money, it's at 24 is pretty substantial as well. You must have put additional money away as well as that $100. That's pretty crazy. So you've done pretty well there, and I think a lot of people don't really realize that just having a principal place of residence and sitting there and living there over a long period of time, even though it's not been a long period of time, it's only been 7 years for you, but just to sit it there and let it grow over time, you can see the sort of results that you've had, and that's a common misconception that a lot of people have. They think they've got to buy all these investment properties and continue to pull out money and withdraw equity and go again and push and push and push and push. But your LVR would be phenomenal unless you've used equity, but from the original amount that you use, your LVR would almost be half. Like that's crazy. So, and talk to us now about sort of how old you are now, where your portfolio sits, and what are your sort of investment goals for the future?
Yeah, mate, you're spot on about the principal place of residence. And just before I sort of touch on my current portfolio, one thing that really helped us along the way was we were able to rent out a couple of rooms as well. And, we rented them out to good friends of ours. And I think that just sort of lightens the load a little bit with the mortgage, the demands of a mortgage, and it probably frees you up a little cash flow and allows you to, to travel and to do some other things. It also provides good accommodation and a rental option for some friends. We still have someone living with us now downstairs. So my house is actually dual occupancy. So downstairs is a fully self-contained flat, and my wife and I live upstairs. So I guess the actual asset was critical in our first purchase. But where I am now, I have a couple of other investments. So we purchased a property on the Central Coast. So I live on the Central Coast. We purchased another one up here in 2017. That was purchased for $562,000. And then we purchased one at the start of 2019 down in South Australia for $273,000. So just trying to diversify our portfolio a little bit there, making sure that we're sort of spreading our risks a little bit, and just making sure we sort of stick to our strategy plan, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like, the dates that you actually purchased in weren't bad times to buy as well. The start of 2019 was a pretty slow market. And when was the second one?
17. So it was probably towards the end of that initial boom, but it was steady for a little while there. And then it really has sort of picked up probably over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, which has been encouraging for us.
Yeah. I think that's great. And, I think, one of the things that you alluded to in the inquiry is that, your portfolio might not be as big as everyone else's that we've had on here. And I think, that's where I want to go moving forward with the podcast, is just everyday stories. And obviously you've done a lot better than most, but having 3 properties. But I think, the big emphasis is you only really need 2 to 5 really good properties to set yourself up for your financial future. And I think you've done that really well. But and just to give some clarity around that, how much is your current portfolio looking like? What's the total value, and what do you think your current LVR is?
Thanks so much for that, mate. Mate, so our current portfolio sits just shy of $2 million. And look, we have a pretty, we have, I guess, a low to medium risk appetite, and our LVR sits at around 60-65%. So, we're both comfortable here. Like you mentioned earlier in the intro, we're starting to move into a different phase of our lives with a little one on the way, and we also got married. So, there's, we just don't want to overextend ourselves as well. And obviously everything now, like as we speak, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market with coronavirus and some other things going on. So I like to put my head on the pillow each night without a worry. So yeah, that's sort of where I sit, mate.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And it's good to be risk adverse as well, to have an LVR that low and on that sort of sum of money. And obviously you probably got some cash buffers and stuff into play. But speaking of getting married and having kids, I mean, do you think your property investment goals have changed since then? Or do you think they're still on the same course? You just might have to delay it by, a couple of years until you sort yourself out and know that you guys are pretty comfortable?
Mate, it depends who you speak to. So if it was up to me, we'd probably be sneaking in another 2 or 3 in the next sort of few months, but my wife's probably a little bit more reluctant. But mate, it would be nice if we could sort of sneak one in before the baby arrives. But if not, I guess it's just going to be a wait and see. Like, I'm very happy and comfortable with where our portfolio is at the moment. All the systems and things we have in place at the moment is going to allow my wife to sort of have a substantial time off, while the baby's young, which is important to both myself and her. But if we don't purchase anything in the next few months, it might just be a wait and see where things are at in 12 months, 18 months, and go forward from there.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. And so, I mean, what is your end goal for investing? I mean, is there an exit strategy? Is there a certain number you want to get to? Is there what sort of pathway do you think you're heading down?
Mate, it's a good question, and one that I know I should have an answer to, and that I get asked a lot. But, mate, ultimately for me, it's just about having options and freedom in life and having some security there. So, mate, if I can continue to invest, every 1 or every 2 years or every 3 years into good quality, high-performing assets, mate, I'll be happy. I think the most important thing is probably not how many properties that you have or, how big your portfolio is, but it's the simple things. It's making sure that every day that you have good habits with managing your money, making sure you're not spending more than you're earning. I'm not rich, not wealthy, but I feel as though, I'm a student of business and a student of life. And I'm comfortable where I'm at right now, and I know that my wife and I are in a very fortunate position because we do the little things every day and we manage our money well. If we want to go on a trip, we can. If we want to do a renovation, we can. I think that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think, people that have probably been listening to the podcast would know this already, but one of my biggest gripes is, us comparing ourselves to everyone else's property portfolios. And it's not a number value. It's a number of properties value. Like, it's not a total value. There's graphs out there that only 95% of people get, to 2 investment properties or whatever. And then only 0.7% or whatever have got 6 or more. And I really dislike that way of looking at property investing, because I could have 7 properties tomorrow. They'd all be worth $100,000, but they'd be the worst assets that you could afford to buy. And it's just a silly way of measuring someone's success. And I think, as you say, it's not about being extremely wealthy or anything like that. It's just about having that sort of financial security and financial freedom at some point to sit comfortably and allow these stages of life to flow through, where your wife can spend some significant time with the younger one when that comes along, and not worry about double incomes or being unable to pay the mortgage, or all these other things that, as you say, don't help you sleep well at night. So I think, and for someone who is in that point of mind now, I mean, what are some of the things that you've implemented as money management skills? Is there a process that you go through when your payday comes along? Is there some separate bank accounts? I mean, how does that look for you?
Yeah, mate, you're spot on. And mate, yeah, there are. We have a very, very basic system. So I guess we implemented this sort of. I'm not saying that we come up with any before the Barefoot Investor, but I'm sure you've probably read it, and it's a fantastic book. But we almost just have a very similar strategy or structure to what the Barefoot Investor suggests. And mate, we basically just live off 60% of our salaries. That's for basically every day and all of our spending, and then the other 40% sort of, is for our long-term wealth and our long-term savings, I guess. I feel like, mate, I feel as though I have this sounds really weird and a little bit corny, but I feel as though I have a pretty good relationship with money. I know a lot of people sort of, can't wait till Friday until they get paid, or they stress about that next repayment on their mortgage, or when a bill comes in or whatever. But for me, it's just, I barely look at my accounts. I know what my structures are like every day, every week. And when things come in, we just pay it, because we have that sort of 40% buffer, if you like. We're always saving money every single week. That's just the way we live. And just even touching on how many properties you have and all that sort of stuff, and those being measurables to how sort of, if you like, wealthy you are. I'm at an age, and you're at an age, where Instagram and socials are everything. If people are driving around in a flash car, they must be loaded. Or if people have got expensive clothes and shoes on, they must be loaded. I find it a little bit intriguing, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's measurable either. You need to be happy and wealthy within yourself. That's probably what counts the most.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And it's all kind of, as harsh as it is to say, sort of show pony-ish as well. You know what I mean? If you've got the nicest car going around, it's going to be the nicest car for the next 3 years, but then it's going to get old and you're going to have to upgrade and buy a new one and pull out a new car loan and all the rest of it. Just, keeping up with the Joneses, as they say. But yeah, I like how you mentioned before that every week or every month you're saving money, and that's really the compound effect of lowering your LVR. So as your LVR, as your debt comes down, you're paying less interest. As you're paying less interest, you're saving more money, and it's just this snowball effect. You get to a point like someone yourself who's quite comfortable with their financial position, and they're just constantly saving money because they're reducing their debt. And you've obviously planned that out. And although you say you set up simple, sometimes simple is the best. You don't have to have these extravagant plans of 50 different accounts all titled movies or going out or having dinner or whatever. It's just keeping it simple and sticking to the process, I guess, and holding yourself accountable. But I really like the story and the journey, mate. I mean, you've alluded to your first property and given us some numbers on that one, but do you think that's been your most successful deal? And if not, I mean, give us another property that you think's been pretty successful.
Mate, yeah, obviously the numbers on that first purchase, are quite big, and mate, it was a fluke. Like, I spent a lot of time researching, and I'd spent years watching shows and reading books and understanding what sort of property I should buy. So there was sort of, there was a little bit of luck, but also an element of education there too. But I guess in terms of the best deals or biggest wins I've had, I think, as you sort of educate yourself and you get more and more experienced, I think on the actual purchase price, on our last purchase in Adelaide, we actually ended up saving a fair bit of money on the sale of the property. It was actually $5,000 less than the other offer that was on the table. But the reason why we managed to secure the property was because that we were very mindful of the vendor's circumstances. I managed to sort of understand why they wanted to sell, and we were very flexible with our settlement date, and we even offered them an opportunity to lease back the property from us. So I guess for anyone out there looking to purchase, I think that's something that you should consider, and it's obviously important that you try and draw out as much information from the sales agent as possible to understand the vendor's circumstances and why they want to sell. And that was just a little win for us personally. And, it's something that I'm very mindful of now, even when I'm, negotiating on clients' behalf and stuff going forward as well.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And I think, a lot of people's approach to negotiating a property is just cutthroat. They're just trying to get the best price they possibly can. And it's not about, hardballing really. It's about understanding, the vendor's expectations, their circumstances, their conditions, everything that's going on through their mind and through their process. And as you say, alluding to, if they need more time or if they want to stay in the property for a little bit longer, they can rent it out for a little bit, or just trying to really figure out all the circumstances. And that way, if you show some sort of consideration or affection or warmth toward them, they'll probably reciprocate it. So I think that's a much better approach to negotiating, just taking a holistic view of all the circumstances that are going on with the property. But and speaking of, negotiating on property and buying property and all that sort of stuff, I mean, what do you look out for when it comes to finding an investment property?
I guess when I'm looking initially, I look at different growth drivers within an area. I see what sort of government spending is happening in the area or government funding. Obviously, always have a look at their economy and making sure that it's diverse. Population growth is also important. So these things are important on like a macro level. But when you're looking at a micro level, so we're talking about the street or the sort of dwelling, I guess it's understanding what the buyers in that local area want. What do they need? Do they want a 2-bedroom apartment? Do they want a 3-bedroom home? Do they want something freestanding? What does the market want down there? Because ultimately, when you purchase that investment, you want someone in there as soon as possible to rent that place out off you, so obviously it doesn't impact your cash flow. So, mate, we have I have a different process that I've sort of worked on over the years that works for me, and it's basically just going through those key indicators to understand what's going to work and where.
Yeah, that's great, mate. I think you got a good overview and take on the whole process. I mean, you've obviously got your own due diligence checks and everything else that goes along with it. But I think starting from that sort of overview and taking a holistic approach is a much better way of starting it. I mean, a lot of people just start with the property, you know what I mean, and they go, okay, this is the one, but they don't really look at the market and the economy and see all these other factors that are more of a holistic approach to decide if it's going to be a good investment or not. But mate, I'm very interested in the QPIA course that you're doing at the moment. I'm actually doing it myself too. I think we've had a little discussion about that. But why don't you give us a little bit of thought process behind that? I mean, what are you looking to get out of it, and how you're liking it so far?
Yeah, mate, I'm actually really, really enjoying it. So, as we mentioned before, I think it was off air. It's an accreditation developed by PIPA, which is the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. A couple of people that sit on the board of PIPA, like Kingsley, Margaret Lomas, Paul Glossop. These are mentors of mine and people that I've looked up to in the property space for a long time. And, they're big advocates for making sure that people out there, whoever sort of leveraging on professionals for advice, is to make sure that they're accredited. And obviously there aren't any, strong legislations within the real estate space for accredited property investment advisors. So they developed a course called the QPIA, which is an acronym for Qualified Property Investment Advisor. And I felt that was important for me to do that because, for one, I wanted to make sure that the information that I have and the knowledge that I have is aligned with what everyone else has that are advising on property. And also, I feel as though it's important for my business to make sure that, I guess, my clients have a little bit more trust in me giving them advice, because I've done absolutely everything that you possibly can do in terms of accreditations and licensing within the country to give advice to investment advisors. So, mate, yeah, they were the main reasons for me. And I know, there are a lot of buyers agents out there at the moment, but yeah, that was just something that I wanted to sort of tie in with my buyers agency business. So
yeah, it's quite funny to see. There's financial advisors, and there's so many regulations and courses and things that they need to keep up with, and you've got accountants who keep up with tax legislation and all this sort of stuff, and then the financial advisors will be giving you advice on shares and all that sort of stuff, and some of them won't touch on property, some of them will. It just depends on who you go with. But it's funny that there's absolutely no regulation around the biggest financial asset that you could potentially purchase. And I know a lot of people out there will say, well, it's just a family home, it's where we're going to live for the rest of our lives. But it's a significant sum of money, and if you buy in the wrong area, you could be kicking yourself 30 years later if you had just bought a couple of suburbs down the road or closer to a train station or a good school or something like that. And so it's just it's crazy that there's no regulation around, and I think it really shows a part of the character for yourself. It's not something that you had to do, it's not something that you're required to do, but you just wanted to show not only your initial skill set, but you've got that qualification, and then provide that to your clients as well.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I find it actually crazy as well that there are no sort of regulations around it. It's quite scary, and I hope at some point the government do implement something because every day there are people, making bad decisions with their investments and even with their owner-occupier stuff or whatever property stuff, that they require. And it's concerning. It's not like shares where you can just buy shares in a day and sell them the next day. It takes time. Investing in properties, we talk about it being a minimum of a 10-year investment. It's a long-term investment, and the opportunity costs and the opportunity loss in that time frame can be hundreds of thousands, which is unbelievable. So it's very important for me, mate, and I'm proud that I'm doing it.
Yeah, no, it's good, mate. It's I'm enjoying it too, and I think the value within the course. Although I have researched most of the stuff in my own time, but just to have that reassurance that the information is correct, and you're getting that guidance from those mentors, as you say, and because they're mentors of mine as well, and sort of following in their footsteps and providing the right education and advice in the industry is super critical. And I hope to at some point in time, regulation does come through to this, and then, property investing becomes, a real recognized asset class, and, there's some more regulation around it. So I love it, mate. But back to your story. I mean, do you reckon you've made a mistake along your journey? I mean, you're quite young yourself and probably haven't, as they say in property, it takes 10 years to realize that you've made a mistake. But do you think that you have? And if you have, is there any lessons that you'd like to pass on from them?
Mate, I reckon I've definitely made mistakes without a doubt. Probably two that really stick out in my mind. One is from day one, I probably didn't set out a clear strategy of, okay, let's try and, accumulate property every 2 years or invest regularly. I just had other things going on, and I was quite happy with my initial purchase. So I wish I had bought more, which is what everyone says. But the other one was I was very educated at the time, and I knew that it was important for me to diversify my portfolio. But just out of fear, I ended up purchasing a property only 2 or 3 suburbs away from my owner-occupiers. So not the exact same market, but a very similar market here on the Central Coast. And mate, I wouldn't say that we haven't lost any money out of that at all. And, it's performed quite well over the last sort of 2 and a bit years because of the market. But the diversification there, I probably could have done a little bit better. But ultimately, at the end, it was just a fear factor. I just couldn't. I knew I should have purchased in another state or another area, but mate, it was just a fear factor at the time. I just honestly, if I'm being honest, I just couldn't overcome it. So I ended up purchasing something that I could walk through, see through, touch, drive past, and do everything else that I needed to do to it, which is unnecessary with property investing. But that's probably a mistake. But I don't regret it. It's all learning. I learn every day. I'm learning all the time, and there are some huge, there are definitely some pros with that property that I bought. It's, there's a value add potential there. It's on a development site. It's got some water views. It's close by. I'm very lucky. I have a really good network up here on the Central Coast of local trades and services of people that I know that could go and do work there for me to add some value. So I wouldn't say it's a complete rotten egg, but if I had my time again, I probably would have split that money a little bit more that I spent on that purchase across multiple states.
Yeah, I think that whole confirmation bias kicks in as well, and I don't know that it's a big mistake. I mean, you've done so well out of your first property and probably wanted to replicate the same results. I mean, I've done something similar along my journey as well. I just wanted to replicate the same results that I have found and on my first one, and have seen those results since. But yeah, it's a hard one to say a mistake unless it's done significantly badly. But it sounds like you've done pretty well out of it, and it served you well. And I think as long as the lesson that's come out of it is maybe I do need some diversification, and it sounds like you've implemented it as well. It's kind of just a lesson, really. You can learn along the way. But thanks for sharing that along with the listeners. Now, you alluded to some resources like Margaret Lomas and Ben Kingsley and their books and educational pieces. But I mean, is there something that's really, really helped you along the way, like a specific book or something like that?
Mate, I probably just can't pinpoint one. I've read nearly every property investment book out there. I've read all of Margaret's books. I've read Paul Glossop's books, the boys from the Property Couch. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time listening to their podcasts and educating myself through those avenues with seminars. But I think I just take a little piece from each book. Even the Barefoot Investor, he's not huge on investing in property, although he does think it's important. I still gain some great, there's some gold nuggets in that. I even read a book recently, Atomic Habits, which I thought was unreal. If anyone out there is looking at sort of improving their day-to-day lives or their habits, I would definitely recommend read that book. It doesn't have anything to do with property, but what it's about is, it's about those little wins on it every day. And I think, in a weird parallel way, it's very similar to investing in property. Like you're not an overnight success when you invest in property. And I think it's just a matter of just chipping away, and then picking the fruits at the end of the road, I suppose. So, mate, yeah, there's probably just a few lessons from multiple books, to be honest.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard good things about that book, Atomic Habits, and I can't wait to read it. I read another one recently called Miracle Morning, and it's all about doing these 6 critical things every morning before you start your day, and it just, it sets you up to realize that whatever else you've got on for the rest of the day is nothing in comparison to what you do in the morning, and you can pretty much achieve anything from the time you wake up, and it's all about getting up early and getting into the day. And I've implemented it since I've read it, and I can't tell you the efficiencies that I've had throughout my journey. So I'll definitely give the Atomic Habits a read. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
What's your morning routine? I'd be keen to hear. What's your morning routine? Well, because I know I've got one, which I love, and I know that it sets me up for a great day. Like it just does. I don't know how people sleep in until 8 or 9 o'clock. I just don't do it. But yeah, I'll be interested to hear your morning routine, mate.
Yeah, it's definitely, I couldn't do 8 o'clock either. I don't know how they do it, but yeah, essentially he goes on about these things called savers. So S stands for silence, A stands for affirmations, V stands for visualizations, E stands for exercise, and then the second S stands for stretching, or like I can't remember now, something else at the end of it, and then R stands for reading. So it's kind of like all these different things. So I wake up in the morning, I do 10 minutes of silence, so just like meditation. Then affirmation. So what are the things that I want to achieve for the day? Visualization. I'll go through and visualize those things that I'm doing for the day. So if I've got to make a call, if I've got to do something big for work, if I've got to, speak to a real estate agent, I'll visualize that in my head and think of all the things that I need to say and all the questions that I need to ask, all that sort of stuff. Exercise, after that, I'll go for a half an hour walk. So I'll just walk around the block, just have my own headspace and think about things, do the same sort of stuff, really. It's just like constant visualizations and affirmations. Then I'll spend 20 minutes reading.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's good, mate. It does the job, and as I said, like after I do that, you just feel $1 million. Like you just feel like you're unstoppable, and you've already thought about everything you're doing for the day. So nothing is a surprise or a challenge or anything like that. You know what I mean? So it's pretty good. What about yourself? Talk to us about your morning routine.
Oh, mate, I'm very much the same. So I have a similar routine. So I'm up at sort of 4:30, or I am up at 4:30. Basically straight to the gym. I train every morning, and then, I wake up at 4:30. In the shower, I'm a big fan of the cold showers in the morning. I know they're tough, but the Wim Hof method, I love.
Nice.
Straight in a cold shower, and mate, if you can handle a cold shower, you can pretty much handle anything that the day is going to throw at you. So that's something that I've just learnt to love. And then off to the gym, I train every morning, sort of between 5 and 6. And then I come home as well, and just as I'm eating breakfast, when I'm at home, I almost do a bit of affirmation as well, and I always just do a little bit of writing until around 6:30. So then I kick my day off. But I think what's really important for me is like you sort of mentioned, that meditation. Now, I have never really gotten into meditation. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but I have basically like a non-negotiable rule, and that's my phone basically being on do not disturb, and that's 2 hours before I go to bed, and then 2 hours when I wake up in the morning. So between 4:30 in the morning and 6:30 a.m., I basically, I have my phone, I guess, with me for music stuff at the gym, but I really challenge myself not to, don't check my emails, don't see my texts, don't have a look to see who's called me late yesterday, or just don't get distracted on any socials, because that's almost, that 2 hour period is almost like my meditation. That's almost like a reset for every day, if you like. So it gives me some time for my brain just to sort of think about what I want throughout the day, what targets do I need to meet, or not necessarily targets, but like you said, what calls do I need to make? What do I want to achieve out of the day? And it's just almost like silence, especially when I'm sitting there eating breakfast. I really, really love it. And the best part about it is I love it when it's dark. It's dark now, and I love just beating everyone to the day. It's so good.
Yeah, there's a real distinct feeling when, you're going for a run or going to the gym and everyone's still in bed. I think that's really inspirational. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of meditating either. I mean, the way he talks about it is, if you're a religious person, you can pray. If you don't know how to meditate, you can just sit there and try not to think about anything. But it's as you say, just trying to get clarity in your day and clear your mind out from all of these distractions. We live in such an instant gratification world, and get notified every 5 seconds. So just trying to get away from that as much as possible. But I love it, mate. But no, it sounds like you're a pretty inspired guy and have done pretty well. You got a low LVR. You got a great wife, as you've alluded to, and a baby on the way. So congratulations, mate. Sounds like you're killing life at the moment. And just as a final sort of piece of advice, I mean, what would you pass on to the younger generation to help them get started?
Mate, I would just say start small and just be patient. Just even if it's a matter of paying off some debts, or some bad debts like credit cards or whatever. If you don't have anything like that, try and work out a way that you can just put away $50 a week, $100 a week, $200 a week, and stick with it. Like, implement some good habits, just be patient and just stick with it, and the results will come. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not wealthy. I'm not at the end of my road either. I'm just like yourself and a few other young guys here. We're just sticking to the course at the moment, and like, I can see the fruits now from habits and some things that I've implemented, but I'm not there yet. And I think the biggest thing is you just got to start somewhere and just stick with it.
I love it, mate. It's perfect advice. Well, Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much, Jordan, mate. Really, really enjoyed our chat.
What an incredible conversation. I love that Matt has a set morning routine that he sticks to set himself up for the rest of the day. Although Matt is very humble and states that he's not wealthy, he has done a lot more than most. And hopefully this inspires you to do the same. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show.
If you're under 30 and have one or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey. Learn from the mistakes that we have made and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing your story, you can go to jordandeong.com/podcasts, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. Also, if you want to see what else I'm up to, you can head over to my YouTube channel to see the latest. Just type Jordan De Jong into YouTube and I should pop up somewhere. If you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.